and welcome to this week's Hippie Hyena. So, obviously, this week there's been war. War has been happening. And I was trying to think, like, how can I sort of cover this when I think part of the problem is that nobody really knows what's going on. As soon as war starts, propaganda starts flying, and there's all kinds of pieces of information going all over the shop, and you never know really what to believe or whether any of it is factual at all. So it's quite difficult to talk about. In addition to this, if I'm being honest, I don't really know that much about that region of the world. So I'm sure there are other people who are much more capable of talking about the conflict there than I am. However, I did notice that, weirdly, one of the people who is sort of in the Hippie Hyena cadre of villains, one Coach Red Pill, weirdly, and I didn't know this, is living in the Ukraine while the invasion is happening, which is very weird. I assume that they lived in America. So there's this sort of piece of law here. I don't know why they're in Ukraine that I'm missing, you know? Anyway, I thought that was interesting. I thought it'd be interesting to have a look what he had to say and to see if there was anything that could be learned from that. And so what I think we should do is take a look at his video, but with specifically bearing in mind the way that the right wing perceive the world, intake information and how they do so, and how that enables them to behave in the way that they do, you know? And also how that might benefit the people that have, in a sense, trained them to view the world in that way or process information in the way that they do. So let's jump in and see what he's got to say.
Good morning. It is Saturday, February 26th, I believe. 3 days away from my birthday. My birthday is February 29th. And this year, of course, it's not leap year. And so I'm going to be celebrating it on the 1st of March.
Look at this guy's face. Look how gleeful he is. How weird is that? He's literally in a country that is being invaded by an oppressive authoritarian force that wants to come in, kill people, overturn democratic elections, and take away the country's sovereignty. He's in that country. And look how happy he is. Look how he's absolutely jizzing himself over it.
So anyway, here I am in the... This is the conference room, as you can see, of the Premier Palace Hotel here in Kiev, where I am staying during the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Look at him callously giggling over the deaths of countless people. At the moment, I mean, it's incredibly hard to tell what is true and what is not true coming out of a warlike situation. Famously, there's the fog of war, and the first casualty of war is the truth. You don't know, but from what it looks like, there's been a lot of death, especially on the Russian side. A lot of dying people, and this guy just giggling over it like a psychopath.
You know, I've been talking to a lot of people, and a lot of people in Kharkov, a lot of people in Kiev, and in other regions as well. And frankly, I can't pronounce the name of the other regions. It's not that I can't say it, it's that I can't pronounce it. Anyway, the point is that I realize I'm incredibly lucky because I'm in the lap of luxury while I'm hunkering down and waiting out the invasion.
This is kind of classic, I'm all right, Jack, get your hands off my stack right-wing selfishness. You know, part of the reason he's able to giggle about the deaths of a lot of people is because here he is in some fancy hotel. He's not having to contend with that. So to him, it kind of doesn't really seem real, I think, because he doesn't have to look at it. And I think that is often the major instincts of the right wing when some people are kind of suffering very unjustly. Their instinct is to sort of imagine that it's not real because they're not looking at it. And if you make them look at it, if you sort of have, like, for example, homeless people like directly in their path, they will complain about that, but not complain about trying to make the suffering less, trying to alleviate that suffering. They won't complain about that. They'll complain about the homeless people being around, so they have to look at them because they want to go back to their sort of psychopathic worldview. And it's not really psychopathy, because a psychopath, a true psychopath, would look at the homeless person and their suffering and would be like, I don't care. Whereas they obviously on some level do care, but they create a kind of artificial psychopathy by just turning their heads away and not looking at the thing which should be triggering a kind of empathic, sympathetic response in them. So they avoid the sympathetic response rather than just don't have it. But the end result is the same, a kind of learned psychopathy.
Now, the invasion so far, I mean, like last night, I slept like a baby. I slept, no, and not that I woke up every 2 hours crying, no. I slept really, really well, actually.
You see what I mean? This is a man who's able to sleep like a baby without any kind of troubling thoughts that might keep him awake, while his neighbours are being massacred. Now that's really not normal. As if it needs pointing out, this man's emotional reaction to the events that he's embroiled in are really, really abnormal. They are not coming from an ordinary psychology. This is severe maladjustment, basically. And it's sort of hard to tell at the end of the day if, severely maladjusted people gravitate to right-wing political views, or whether right-wing political views kind of turn you into someone who's maladjusted. And maybe it's a sort of, it's chicken and egg. It's a bit of column A and a bit of column B. The right-wing sort of view on the world attracts people who are already psychologically unhealthy, and then it kind of exacerbates that until you get somebody like this giggling and laughing and sleeping well and enjoying the fact that their fellow citizens are being murdered by deranged narcissists.
I slept in my room, not in the basement shelter, which I showed you in a previous video. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be, spending several €100 per night on a nice room and sleep in the fucking garage, man. No, I'm going to get my money's worth. And if my room gets blown up by a missile, so be it. At least I got my money's worth before I became, pink mist.
Now, an interpretation of this insane behaviour is either perhaps he's very brave or he's really rather stupid. But I think actually there's a third option. It's not really either. It's just that he doesn't really believe what is happening, not in a real way. To him, it's just all a cartoon, And in one sense, that sort of like comes from the height of privilege. It comes from a situation where, for the most part, when you do hear about dangers like this, they are overblown, because if you're sort of relatively wealthy, come from Western democracy, largely you've kind of got it cushy in comparison to places which are a little bit more unstable and war-torn, like you may argue Ukraine is. But I think more it comes from this kind of learned psychopathy of the right, where they're sort of trained to not really see these things as real, or as having sort of real, genuine human cost, even if that cost is potentially to yourself. And you'll notice this all over, that when you talk about the sort of human cost of right-wing policies, you'll find the right-wing people will just kind of laugh it off, because they don't really even see it as kind of realistic. It's a kind of almost like solipsistic worldview, where they're completely self-regarding in their own little bubble, And he can feel safe, like completely safe in that hotel room, as long as he doesn't have to look at the missile. And right up until the missile comes into his room and turns him into that red mist, he won't believe that it's real. Not at his core, he won't really believe in it, because it's the same thing of like out of sight, out of mind. And they're sort of trained to view the world in this way, to sort of close themselves off from community and society in general in such a way, because it's beneficial to the elites, who then can be exploiting people over here, and the people over there won't do anything about it because they won't sort of see that as real, and vice versa. So it's sort of a divide and conquer kind of tactic. Like, it's the more you instill this kind of dissociated psychopathy in the populace, the more easy they are to exploit, weirdly. Because in general, dissociated psychopaths don't like unionize.
Well, it turns out that now those civilians are shooting one another with those goddamn weapons. I mean, I thought it was the height of irresponsibility, because you all of a sudden turn a civilian with no military experience into a military target. And my thinking was that this is just going to put civilians in harm's way so as to get a photo op for the Ukrainian government. I thought it was really evil and despicable.
So what it's doing now is spreading propaganda, like pro-Russian, anti-Ukraine propaganda, essentially, during a war between those two countries, and inside the country that he is propagandizing against. Now, there's kind of a long history of this, in one sense. Back in the Second World War, in Britain, there was a character known as Lord Haw-Haw, that's Hawhaw, which you can look look up. I'm sure there's Wikipedia articles about them. I found out about them through my grandparents. Basically, they were a kind of German, they were a British person, but would spread German propaganda, so propaganda, pro-Nazi propaganda to the British people. And obviously, they're incredibly unpopular in Britain and thought of as a horrific traitor. But here you have an American citizen, I believe, who is propagandizing against America's allies and for America's enemies. Not only that, he's doing so from inside the country that he's propagandizing against during a time of war. Now, on one level, you might think this could be a principled stand, a kind of very brave, principled stand for him to say these things. When, to be honest, I would imagine that the Ukraine government would be well in their rights to grab this guy and at least shove him in some kind of prison and stop him from continuing to produce propaganda for the enemy, because that's what he's doing. Now, I don't wish violence on anyone, you know. I'm a hippie, like peace and love and all that stuff. But at the same time, if someone sticks their hand into fire and then they get burnt from that fire, it's kind of their own fault sometimes, you know. But here's this guy doing what is, if you really think about it, an incredibly dangerous and stupid thing. Quite aside from the fact that he's producing pro-Russian propaganda, who, from all we can tell right now, kind of really seem to be the bad guys in this conflict. And in one sense, no surprise that this absolute moron is siding with the bad guys, because he's literally sides with the wrong side on every single point ever throughout his entire public career. That's basically his job at this point. But putting that aside, what he's doing is incredibly dangerous to his own safety. But why is he able to do this? Why is he able to be this brave? Well, again, I think it's just that he doesn't really see himself as being in any danger. He can't understand anything outside of his immediate sensory perception. He's just out of sight, out of mind. And I think, you know, you kind of saw this in one sense in the with the January 6 rioters who were trying to overthrow the democracy of America and like force their way into a government building and so on, commit acts of unbelievable terrorism. And yet a lot of them were just completely surprised when they were getting in trouble, when they've got in trouble for it, when the police like arrested them, when they stopped them from flying back home to wherever they came from, you know, completely stunned by it, because it was like the consequences of their actions were just, you know, not immediately visible, and therefore they just couldn't perceive them. They've been trained into total psychopathy, or a total affective psychopathy.
As you can see, there is electricity, there's running water, there's internet, there's telephony. Everything is working very, very well. Obviously, they don't want to hurt the civilian population. It's very obvious, because if they wanted to hurt the civilian population, they would have cut the water, cut the electricity ages ago.
Yeah, more kind of apology for the Russians. There's countless reasons why they might not have done those things. For example, because they might want to use those themselves. Also, maybe they haven't done them because they've failed to do them. They've tried, but it hasn't been possible. There's been various efforts to especially keep the internet open from groups like Anonymous. Elon Musk even is helping them out with a satellite, I believe, and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it doesn't really say anything about the intentions of the Russians. You know, they've been bombing hospitals and things like that, if the reports are to be believed. The idea that they don't want to hurt the population is just an absurd one. Absolutely absurd, especially based on the reasoning that he's giving here. What it is just trying to massage the facts into making it look as though the Russians aren't as bad as they may be. And why would he do this? Well, there is this weird connection between the right wing, the sort of global right wing, but especially in the West, and Putin. You know, you can see that where, you know, Trump just can't wait to bend over and take it from Putin every opportunity. You know, because really, I think at the core of the right-wing base are a bunch of people who just love to really love to bootlick, and they feel like if they're bootlicking someone who's tougher than the person that is your leader, then they're sort of winning. You know, they can sort of attach themselves to that, and their sort of notion of what a winner looks like is like really a sort of very primitive, stupid one. So with Putin throwing his weight around and so on, being authoritarian, they see that as powerful because they don't really understand what power really is, and they are sort of ready to bend over and bootlick towards that power, especially when in some ways he aligns with some of their extremely abhorrent views, like the way that gay people are treated in Russia is appalling, trans people and so on. They would like a bit more of that over here. So you can see why they would weirdly admire someone who is ostensibly communist, or at least you could see how somebody could kind of argue that, even though I don't think that he's communist at all, personally. But aside from why they might support Putin or someone like that, this guy is only able to promote Putin because he sees this entire thing as kind of like a game, and the human cost just doesn't really penetrate his mind in any sense, you know? So what can we learn from this? Well, we can learn that part of the way that the right wing is able to partake in unbelievable humanitarian atrocities is largely because they're kind of trained to not view any of other people's suffering as real. And they're able to also put themselves in danger because they don't really understand the danger, because they're also trained to not see that as real. And the reason why they're trained in this way is because it benefits the elites to train people like this, because it makes them far more obedient and less likely to turn against authority figures and the people who are wielding this power over them. And like in this video, Coach Red Pill is a particularly egregious example of this learned insanity. Anyway, I hope you got something out of this video, or at least a little bit entertained. Hippie hyena out. Goodbye.